everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar sponsored by AOI. Before we begin, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. On the left-hand side of your screen is the Q&A box. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can type your question into the Q&A box and submit them to our speakers. All questions will be saved, so if we don't get to answer you, we may follow up via email. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets you can use. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the yellow Help widget. Here you can find answers to common questions. A copy of today's slide deck is available for download in the blue Resource List widget. Towards the end of today's presentation, we'll ask for your feedback. A survey is already open on your screen and will only take 1 minute to complete. Your feedback is extremely helpful. An on-demand version of the webcast will be available about 1 day after the event and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier today. I would now like to turn the event over to our Omdia's Research Director, Cloud and Security, Jim Hodges. Jim?
Thanks, operator, and welcome everybody to today's webinar. Happy Thursday. We have a really interesting webinar for you today. The title of our webinar is called Smarter Outside Plant Strategies for Remote Management and Network Reliability. So at a really high level in today's webinar, we're going to be talking about how the cable industry is really looking to evolve its network and looking and turning to things such as remote management, looking at smart amplifiers, distributed access architectures, and really kind of tying together their strategy to evolve their networks from some legacy gear to new opportunities and to new network configurations. So joining me today and today's sponsor from AOI, we have with us Steve Pedersen. Steve is the Vice President and Chief Product Officer of Broadband Networks at AOI. Welcome, Steve. Looking forward to participating and presenting with you. And tell us a little bit about yourself and your role.
Yeah, sure, Jim. Thank you for the introduction. Glad to be here. As a Chief Product Officer at AOI, I'm basically responsible for anything around our products, whether it be product strategy, product operations, development, both software and hardware, et cetera. So pretty much anything related to products, as I previously said.
Good stuff. Okay, thank you. So in terms of the way we've kind of created the structure for today's webinar, we're going to talk a little bit about remote management network reliability, and we'll explain all that, and we'll talk about some of the interest and what this means, what are the benefits, and what are some of the upgrade strategies. We'll also talk about some implementation challenges associated with remote management. And then we'll also look at how analytics and some advanced features, architectures, and amplifiers kind of come into play in terms of how cable operators are really evolving their networks. So what I'm going to be doing today is presenting some research that Heavy Reading Now Omdia did in the fall Q4 of 2024 that we published earlier this year. And this was really a survey that we did globally of cable operators around the world. And after basically the survey, we had 108 qualified respondents. So these respondents had to work for a network operator and had to be really involved in decisions and business strategies and a number of different areas as well. So this report, we have uploaded this report for you to download for the audience. Now, if you logged in earlier, you may not see it there. So what you have to do is refresh your screen on the audience user interface side of the platform. So if you do that, you should see this report's available for download. So let's jump right into it here. So as I said, I want to talk about remote management, network reliability, interest, benefits, and upgrade strategies. So I'm going to be presenting a series of slides, and then I'll be turning over to Steve to kind of get his thoughts on that. These are going to be the research slides from the report that I just touched on. So there's a lot of really excellent information in the report for you. So we hope you have or you will download it. So let's talk about remote access management. So Steve, I'll present this and then I'll turn to you to kind of get your thoughts as well. But when the whole point of the research in some respects was to look at some opportunities for how service providers can, manage and monitor their HFC network assets remotely. And I think that has a lot of benefits because of obviously operational cost savings, but also visibility in terms of network performance. So when we asked the cable operators, how interested they were in their ability to monitor and manage their HFC network assets remotely. They really kind of, I think, reinforced that this is something that is really much of interest to them. 32% said they're very interested, and 40% said that they're interested, and 23% said somewhat interested. Really, only 5% said no interest at all. So 95% are interested. A third of those are very interested, and 40% are interested. So when you take those two together, you're kind of in the 70%, 72%. So nearly 3/4 of the respondents said that they were either interested or very interested. So I think, to me, this was an important part. We asked this question up front in the survey because we really wanted to dig down and understand sort of the interest in it. And I think this clearly shows that there is a lot of interest. And I'm just wondering, we're going to talk about some of the reasons or some of the value propositions associated with remote access or asset management in a couple of slides, but kind of maybe give me your thoughts on this from your perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Yeah, I would say I was not surprised in the least when I saw this. And actually, I think if you were to retake this data today, since it's a couple quarters ago when this was done, you would actually even skew higher to the top, just based on the conversations that I had with multiple MSOs at SCT, as well as my peers across our competitors and other people in the industry. There's, the technology brings so many things to bear that hasn't been there before in traditional HFC networks, and with that, a number of benefits and values to the MSOs and then customers, which, as you mentioned, we'll get into going forward. So again, high response here relative to interest, and I think this will continue to grow as new and kind of outlooking AI and other things continue to build on the basis of the smartness of the network.
I agree. Good stuff. Okay, so let's kind of move on. So then we also want to understand, after having established that there is a strong value proposition from the MSOs, we wanted to understand which part of your HFC plant will you upgrade first to remote network management? Is it amplifiers, fiber plant, the nodes themselves, the cable head ends, or the coax plant? And you can kind of see the three. There was considerable interest, I would say, in all three, or all five, but the three that kind of stand out here are amplifiers, fiber plant, and nodes. So I think, for me, the amplifiers makes a lot of sense in terms of being able to manage them remotely, in terms of, depending on what the node configuration, how many amplifiers they're using to serve and deliver content. Fiber plant obviously is a key part of that, as well as are the nodes that kind of are connected to some of the amplifiers. So I think kind of all three of these, the way we asked the question, I think all three of these kind of show that they're really looking at how the MSOs can really manage their strategies and get enough capacity for amplifiers and plant and their nodes to provide really high value services. So I think this was an interesting one for me, and it kind of, to me, just reinforced the importance of all three of these areas. Steve, what's your takeaway here?
Yeah, very similar, Jim. I think, every MSO has a different strategy to kind of implement their journey, tied to the offerings and things they want to do to their end customer. And you're correct. Really, when you look at these things, they're all tied together, because at some point, if you're migrating to, say, DOCSIS 4.0 or just some of the other, DOCSIS 3.1 plus, whatever it might be, there's a lot of these different areas that you potentially have to touch depending on where you're starting today, right? And different MSOs will start at different points, depending on budgets and what works best for them for the dollar spend. And again, some may do what we would call like an AMP first strategy, which is kind of highlighted here by the 52%, or about half the respondents. Tied to that, there's fiber that drives that, nodes with RPDs, and moving to a DAA, and then obviously virtual CMTS and head end. So they're all interconnected in many different ways, but every MSO's journey is a little different depending on where they're at, where they're headed.
Yeah, maybe just one point too, in terms of remote access for remote network management for amplifiers. I mean, even amplifiers can provide data in terms of analytics as well. We're going to talk about analytics a little bit later as well. Being able to get access to some analytical data through some of the amplifiers, I think, is kind of a a way to kind of access real-time data that's probably important as well. So it's also the network, but also I think data is kind of a part of this. And we're going to see, we have a question later on about analytics that kind of ties nicely into this. So yeah. Okay. So let's move on. So this question then was to really, I think, an important kind of close the feedback loop was, what are the primary benefits of managing HFC networks remotely? So when we asked the MSOs that, we've already established that they're very interested in this capability, that they have kind of 3 areas that they want to focus on that are network based. And so when we asked them about, are they focusing on increasing network efficiency, operational costs, reducing install setup? I think all of these are important, but it seemed that I think in these days of capacity, the one that stood out the most to me here was 59% said increasing network efficiency. And I think that's part of it as well. And operational cost was second, and then reducing install setup, 27%, managing ingress issues in the field, improving technical workflows, 24%, and managing tracking network assets, almost 20%. So I think these are all important. I think the ones that kind of stand out are kind of operationally driven, reducing setup time, but I think also increasing network efficiency. And let's face it, a lot of these things we'll see later in terms of DOCSIS 3.1 plus, a lot of migrations going to 4 is in respect, a lot of ways about network efficiency. So I wasn't too surprised by this, but I think it's a nice slide to kind of reinforce what most of are looking at as they move forward. And again, I'll bring you in as a subject matter expert. Steve, I'll bring you in here. What do you think is driving some of this?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, not surprised by what came across here in the respondents. One thing I will say is, part of the question was to select your top 2. If this was wide open, I guess every one of these boxes would have been checked by most of the MSOs, right? Because they're all important. It all kind of ties into things that they currently may have issues with out there and are looking to improve as they invest in their network, et cetera. And, at the end of the day, what you're seeing here around all these pieces, the smarts and the intelligence of the overall network, some of these things are just the beginning of where it's going to end up. The key now is that the technology is available, and it's available at a price point and at a power budget that allows MSOs to wisely invest in this, where in the past, some of these things might have been very, very expensive, or re-engineering of the network, et cetera. And with the evolution of where we're at today, and you could even argue some of the revolution of where it's at, all these sort of things kind of come to bear and are going to play great dividends out for the MSOs in general.
Yeah, great points. Okay, so let's talk about remote network management impacts. So where will remote management have the greatest impact on your HFC plant? And this one's a ranking, so it wasn't the select 2. And your point about the previous one was spot on. We asked, the previous slide was basically select the 2 out of the 5 of the list. This one, we asked them to rank them. And so if we look at the number 1 rankings, you can see operational costs, 47%, and then workforce staffing, 20-ish, ingest issues, I think there should be ingress issues in the field, subscriber install, and technician workflows were sort of that. So the kind of the 2 that talked about here are staffing, and that kind of goes to, I guess, operational efficiency in a way, but operational costs, obviously, to the management associated with things like truck rolls and just network monitoring are kind of a key part. So, this one was, I think, an important one for me because it kind of reinforced what we've already seen in terms of the MSOs focusing on the network from a capacity, but also very strongly from an operational context as well. And I think that really is this ranking shows a lot of importance to me. Again, what do you think, Steve?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's almost 2 to 1, right? From operational costs to the next piece down, which is a significant data point. And, and there's a lot of pieces that kind of fall under that operational cost. The fact that the technology is there today, is fantastic with these deployments and where it's going. And I think it's, this illustrates kind of the value in the things that people are expecting to get out of the solutions that are there today. So, yeah, no surprises here, really.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay. So let's talk about firmware upgrade strategies. So we wanted to understand also the methods or which ways that MSOs were carrying out their firmware upgrade strategies and security enhancements. This was also select 2 out of the list. And you can kind of see here that managed centrally with remote and automated updates, that was kind of the first approach. And then the second 44, secure policy-based automated updates, pre-testing updates 38%, and scheduled manual updates by technicians, and then strategic assessment 28. So for me, this one, again, this was a select the top 2. I would say that all of these, basically the 5 of them had levels of support that they were in the top 2, 30% to 50%. It's not a huge range. And I think really kind of shows to me, I spend a lot of my time looking at security, and one of the things that any network operator, and an MSO included, has to be able to do is support policy-based automated updates, because that's obviously kind of tied to operational, but it's also part of the network response mechanism as well. So to me, these are all key parts. I mean, managing centrally with remote updates is, I think, kind of goes back to that first chart that we saw that said that there's a lot of interest in remote network asset management. So to me, this is again reinforcing from the service providers who took the survey really have, I think, a clear view and are pragmatically looking at what approaches they want to carry to do their updates. Again, I'll turn to you, Steve, for your thoughts.
Yeah, I think a couple of key points relative to this is, with the smart amplifiers or any sort of smart product out in the field, connectivity is key, right? Being able to reach out there, because you embedded software out there throughout the network. And, as is with any software, it evolves, everything from, the minor bug fixes to additional features, et cetera. So that connectivity is key in order to drive those different policies and feature set down to the amplifiers in this case I'll talk about. And and each MSO has a different way that they're going to look to do those updates, et cetera. One thing that is obviously paramount that you hit on, and it's kind of inlaid in here a little bit as well, is around the security. Since you have connectivity, and this is driving into a much larger part of the network and connecting into the MSO's overall network, security is paramount. It's super, super important. And the keys around that then gets down to some of the technology that you're using in order to reach out and talk with those amplifiers. There's multiple ways to do this, multiple different pieces and et cetera. But from our perspective, we've placed our bets in a technology called LoRaWAN. LoRa is used heavily in the IoT space, the millions and millions and millions of devices. And with that, there security embedded in that technology. And then there's dual encryption keys and other things like that are used in order to make sure that, not only do the MSOs have the connectivity to upgrade as they need to, but it's also very, very secure. 2 important points.
Yeah, just to go back to some of the points you made some excellent points here. I mean, the operational impacts or costs associated with having to, visit or actually physically go to an amplifier to do the upgrade or updates is significant. So there's an operational, and we've always seen the operational value of that from the previous slides here. So I think this kind of reinforces that it's viewed that being able to do these updates, with the remote automated updates is a huge cost savings as well. But also, like you said, it delivers the updated policies when they're needed immediately.
Yeah, and you're spot on, right? I kind of glassed over that piece a little bit, but to me, it's that connectivity and the ability to do this at a remote, centralized location is kind of table stakes, right? The cost for truck rolls, especially in the U.S. or North America, I could say, is significant, and so that remote connectivity is table stakes and needs to be there in order to effectively manage and do all the things that need to be done with that embedded software. For sure.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, so let's talk about implementation challenges. We've already seen that there's a very strong value proposition associated with remote asset management. But let's talk about implementation challenges. It's clear that MSOs, like you said a couple of times, Steve, each MSO has its own sort of evolution path and journey. So that means they've got different embedded HFC equipment, different standards are running, different everything. So we did want to understand kind of the challenges associated with managing HFC network remotely for MSOs. And so we asked them, this was again a select top 2. We wanted to be able to sort of do some sort of sensitivity testing. And I would say here that based on these selections from the 108 MSO survey respondents, you can see 55%, so that integrating remote management across legacy new equipment was kind of the primary challenge, which makes sense. Kind of my earlier comments about every MSO has their own legacy network to deal with. But the other ones are all very closely linked. 31% for purchasing the right smart equipment, integrating, installing the new smart equipment, 35, training the workforce to use the new management tools, 39, and then 39 gathering all the information needed for remote access management, remote network management, asset management. So I think I would say, it's a clear kind of leaning towards more than half saying, well, it's an integration challenge, but the other part of it is sort of, I would say, the challenges associated with introducing any new equipment, whether it's in the MSO or a mobile operator. It's all about training workforces, integrating it, and making sure you obviously have the right strategic vision in terms of purchasing and working with vendors. So I think, to me, this is, again, looking at how MSOs pragmatically are looking at this on kind of two different levels, on the integration side, but also the turning up the equipment and training side. And again, Theo, I'll turn to you and to kind of give us your thoughts to this.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So yeah, and you hit on this, as with any new technology advancements in deployment, there's always a set of challenges, right, around the implementation. And one of the things that I kind of pride our org and I think is critical is, as a supplier, that's one of the things that we need to think about very deeply, not after the fact when the product's getting ready to launch and create, but we need to consider that in our development, our strategy, roadmaps, content creation, et cetera, as you kind of build the platform, working with key MSOs to get guidance along the way around this. And one of the things that's somewhat unique relative to the past for with dumb amplifiers, we'll call it, now setup, management, and everything else is based on user interfaces. So making sure that your user interfaces, whether that be at the local level at the amplifier, whether that's at the central level, or for the node and the products that kind of take it from there down through the network, are easy to use by the operators, and and easy to pick up and transition them to this new technology. So I think a lot of it comes from planning from the start and implementation on that. And I was not surprised by these the 5 items and how kind of tightly grouped they were from the response.
Yeah, one of the nice things when we went through this research together, one of the nice things is how this chart ties into the first couple of charts we did in terms of aligning with their priorities, and now on a more granular level what that means from a management, from an HSC management perspective. So I think this really kind of tied it together, that it reinforces their multiple stakeholders and multiple decision paths here for making these and addressing these challenges. We also wanted to understand challenges related to downtime and repairs, because clearly these are things that, as you turn up new equipment in your network, and if you start rolling out smarter equipment, I think a lot of these are driven by the need to address some of these challenges. But we asked them, again, this was ranking, we asked them to rank the biggest challenges, and they said that loss of service revenue, 36%, tying up technicians and service crews, or obviously dealing with network downtime was second. Again, that's kind of operational dealing as well, dealing with customer complaints. So obviously, when the network's down, there's always a deluge of customer impacts and complaints. Cost of repairs was kind of lower on the 11% side, and then diverting attention from other critical network issues was low. So I think kind of it's interesting to me is that this is something that I've seen in a lot of the research. A lot of times it's not the cost of the repair that's the biggest issue. It's more the customer impacts. It's the tying up with technicians and skilled resources, and it's the revenue as well. So it's, the repair itself may be straightforward and relatively low cost, but the operational customer experience and revenue implications are really that. And I think, as we move forward, as the cable industry moves forward and evolves, I think MSOs are kind of looking at things as using smarter networks, smarter intelligence, whether that's AI or analytics, but a lot of looking at how they can use things like smarter networks and smarter amplifiers to address some of these challenges. And again, Steve, what kind of piqued your interest in this chart?
Yeah, so wasn't overly surprised by the data, but what I was happy to see relative to the response on this, and give credit to the MSOs, Cable Labs, and SCTE, in creating the specifications and stuff around smart networks and smart amplifiers. This new generation of products basically attacks all of these different areas, right, around the downtime challenges. And when you tie in not only the connectivity, the data, and the smarts, and you alluded to it as well, and you bring that back to centralized location with today's newest technologies in machine learning and AI, et cetera, there's things that can be done, to where there's exceptional visibility into the network. Insights can be gained to become proactive rather than reactive. Mean time to the repair is significantly going to reduce based on all these things, which hits on several of these different areas as well. So I think the industry in general has done a really good job of heading in this direction and to really face on these challenges.
Yeah, that's a great point. The mean time to repair is something I hadn't thought about, but yeah, that kind of ties directly nicely to tying up technicians and service crews, obviously. So the shorter the time to repair is going to have some big impacts on minimizing customer complaints, also minimizing revenue loss as well from services. Yeah. Okay, so let's move on to the next section. So we talked about some implementation challenges, and we touched upon how a lot of these implementation challenges, Steve talked about these, how a lot of these challenges can be dealt with through smart applications. So we're going to talk about advanced features, we're going to talk about architecture, we're going to talk about smart amplifiers, and also analytics. So that's kind of what we wanted to do in sort of the next section of this presentation. And we're going to do a bit of a deep dive in all these areas. And I think there's some really interesting things that we'll investigate as we move forward. So we started off really wanting to understand what advanced features would improve your network operations the most. Would it be automatic gain control for cable connector degradation? Would it be precision geolocating historical setup tracking? Would it be remote ingress or signal quality management? So number one was 48% or 47.2%, close to 48, said that automatic gain control for cable connector and degradation was number one, and then remote ingress signaling quality management number 2 to 32, and then 20% said precision geolocating historical setup tracking. So I guess when I think of automatic gain control, I kind of think of this as kind of a key feature of a smart amplifier, being able to compensate for network signaling control as you go forth. So I think this kind of ties into the demand or the interest in smart amplifiers, because that's kind of to me, that's one of the key features. The other part about ingress, so traffic, I think is interesting, because I think it's a bit of maybe of a detection as well. So if you can detect signaling quality or degradation in that as well, I think it can really kind of help them manage the noise and how that impacts services. And then the other part, to me, geolocating, to me is maybe looking at it from a construction perspective, being able to, I guess, analyze where to dig and things like that. But it can also be maybe used for fleet management as well, to optimize truck rolls as well. So I'm sure you're much more of an expert in this than I am on these features, Steve. So kind of maybe give us your thoughts on each one of them and why they're important, and why you think the MSOs are really focusing on automatic gain control first.
Yeah, sure. So let's start with the first one. So today's kind of modern automatic gain control is automatic level and slope control, ALSC. It's kind of the acronym in the industry today. And This is a feature in the latest generation smart amps. It automatically adjusts both the output level and the signal slope to maintain network performance, right? And it's live, it's continuous automatic realignment, to prevent service downtime. It gives you indication of network degradation, and which can all drive into proactive maintenance procedures as well. So it's living, it's breathing, it's constantly looking at it and adjusting based on a profile that's set up per amplifier. In this case, in order to, as things happen in the network, whether it's, connector degradation, as you have called out here, or many other things that live out there in these networks, and it'll automatically adjust for that to compensate. So very, very powerful over, in the past, at times having to go out, potentially changing equalization and padding. I've even heard stories of some extreme environments where, temperature can rise to 100 degrees in the summer, and minus 30 in the winter, where they would actually have to go out several times a year in order to manually replace some of the plug-in modules that we used to have in these things. Now this is all automatic. It's all in the digital control side of this rather than plugins, and much easier to use with great benefits for everybody, as highlighted here in this survey. When it gets to precision geo-tracking and historical tracking setup, two more powerful areas that involve in the capability in most of the smart amplifiers. And what this basically does is, in the past, versus having as-built maps, et cetera, that have to be referenced constantly for these things, which are constantly getting obsoleted, as the network changes over time. The amplifier is geo-tracked. So, you can overlay this on Google or other types of maps, and it's smart enough in order to, since it is a smart connected network, build out and see how the network is connected on those maps. So think of the power of that, the ability where, hey, we've got a problem out in this area that we're starting to register. Here's the exact GPS location in order to get to that amplifier. Here it is on a map on what street you have to drive to get to it. Just much easier and more enhanced over the processes that were done in the past. And then from a historical setup standpoint, which is also tied in this questionnaire, in the past, there's no way to really track the changes that occur throughout the network and the adjustments. Now, between the smarts that are in there and the memory, et cetera, amps can be set to have a default, and then it tracks defaults from that default, what changes has been made, what is and who they were made by, and the technician for us. And what this could help drive is, to see, hey, is there areas where we might be missing on in training that we need to beef up on? Is it certain individuals that, maybe need some additional training, et cetera? So, very, very powerful when it looks to workforce management and time to get to the amplifier and actually help on the repair. And then when you look at remote ingress, obviously one of the biggest issues in cable plants today and signal quality with these new smart amplifiers and systems, there's a couple things that can be done. One is you can wink all the legs of the amplifier itself to kind of narrow down where ingress is. There's also the smarts in there today to actually locate within a certain distance where this problem might be happening in a span of an amplifier. And you can do this, remotely. You don't have to have somebody necessarily on site in order to start to do the triage. And then when you pull AI into that, the AI and the machines that you feed the data in from the network will start to look for trends in this area as well. And then you can take it a step further when a technician is out there working around these different areas, and they say, hey, the AI can give insights as far as, well, if this is a problem that we're seeing, here's usually the top three reasons why that occurs, to give some guidance for the technician as well. So, the advanced features, where they're heading, we're at the very start of these pieces, and and it's only going to continue to grow as the data is fed into the machines.
Yeah, great points. And maybe just this last one about remote ingress. It must be for MSOs. This area must be something that they're obviously constantly vigilant about it, because obviously we're seeing traffic patterns increasing as well. So the more traffic that's kind of coming into the network, does that necessarily make signaling quality management more difficult, Steve, or is it kind of the same tools, or is it different?
Yeah, you could use similar tools that we've used in the past, right? I think that there's a couple things that have kind of changed around this. Is there's been advancements from the people in the test equipment world around some of this as well, and where they're running, and there's some of that shown. It was super cool at SCT this year. And then I think there's also things that have been done from the smart amplifier standpoint to where you have the ability to capture spectrum as well from any location and any device, right, to help in the management of these things. So, multiple improvements that have been made there.
Okay, great points. Okay, so let's speaking of smart amplifiers, let's talk about some of the architecture. So this slide was really kind of a level set. We want to understand the MSOs, what's sort of their most common network architecture that they have in their cable systems. And you can see it's node plus zero amps or 2 amps or 4, 6, or more than 6. So the kind of I would say the majority of the of the MSOs that took the survey kind of aligned with the 39% with the node plus 4 amps, 4 amplifiers, and then 31%, 32 rounded was node plus 2. So these are kind of the two other ones. We had some that were dealing 60% with 6 amps and so on. Obviously, depending on scale and geographical conditions and densities, there's a number of different. There's no right answer here, but I think it just kind of does show that from the most common is kind of the node plus 2 and node plus 4. And I guess, again, this kind of shows the value if you think about it. The more amplifiers you're dealing with, the smarter they are. To me, intuitively, it means that there's going to be some operational opportunities to reduce operational costs and also to do updates and things like that. But what are your thoughts here, Steve?
Yeah, to me, this was kind of a good reminder on the diversity of the network architectures and really what is out there from a Cascade standpoint. It's when I saw that, there's 15, just over 15%, just over 10% with, so 25% plus that are still at node plus 6 or higher. It's a good reminder that on the development side, when you look at extended spectrum DOCSIS, for example, we have to design for these things, right? Because it's reality that's out there in the network and it's capable of addressing that. So, that's the numbers, I guess, surprised me a little bit on the high end. But like I said, good reminder that, when we do develop these things, we develop it to cover the full gamut of what's out there in the network, including this.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so let's move on. Let's actually talk about DOCSIS. We've touched on it. We did have a series of questions related to updating or upgrading HSC networks to the higher version of DOCSIS. So the question was simply when will you start upgrading your HSC to a higher order of DOCSIS? And this one is really just to get the timeline, not necessarily the actual version, which we'll talk about in the next slide. So when do you plan to start upgrading your network? 22% said they've already done that. 29% said next year, 24% in 2026, and then 2027 was 12, and then 6 was 2028 or later, or no plans at all. So I think this, again, this is kind of a nice benchmark chart that shows that there is going to be a lot of activity around this. The question is, which version of DOCSIS and what configurations are they going to use? But to me, it shows that there's a lot of activity happening, as we would expect, because as MSOs look to evolve their networks, obviously updates and upgrading their network is a key strategic part of that. And so they need to have the decisions in place from a vendor selection and really, I guess, strategic plan to do all that. And again, Steve, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this one in terms of when you talk to customers. What are their plans? Is this aligned with that?
Yeah, I would say it's interesting data, right? And I think, when you look at the major things that the discussed and at the shows over the last few years, this kind of highlights, exactly what those conversations have been around. And, and that upgrade is different for different people. We were coming straight out of kind of a 1.2 gigahertz upgrade and then rolled right into 1.8. And the key, I think, around this is the start of the upgrade. Yes, there's a lot of people that are starting, but usually this process takes, several years because of the amount of work that it takes in order to be out in the field and upgrading, the millions of amplifiers that are out there across the MSO stage. And I think we're in for a, really good run here through the future. So.
Yeah, good points. Okay, so then let's kind of do the jumping into here into the different DOCSIS versions. So which version of DOCSIS are you considering upgrading to? So this was select all that apply. We wanted to, and we specifically said considering upgrading to, because we wanted to have the full discussion on here in terms of DOCSIS 4.0, ESD versus FDX and DOCSIS 3.1 plus. I mean, if you look at the number one, but all I would say is kind of the four of them are all in play. And I guess when I think about ESD, DOCSIS 4 ESD, that kind of makes sense. It's the number one place. It seems to be the preferred approach for Europe, and there's some MSOs in North America that are committed to this as well. So that's kind of stood out. In second place was DOCSIS 3.1 plus, 29%. We talked a lot here about operational, being able to reduce operational costs. I'd say anytime you can, take DOCSIS 3.1 and increase the number of channels and capacity, it kind of, to me, has a strong value proposition. So just being able to double those channels is a key part of that. You can do it cost effectively. So 29%. And then FDX, there's a lot of, I think, interest in FDX in terms of that. And then I think maybe there's also interest in, we saw here in terms of ESD and FDX as well. Both of them 27%. So I think this kind of reflects, the industry leaning, MSOs lean towards DOCSIS 4.0 ESD in terms of having that extended spectrum, being able to leverage that to be more efficiency, maybe for rural networks. So there's a lot of different moving parts here that Steve, you're the expert on, that can maybe talk to. But I also kind of my research, I think FDX maybe has some interest as well from some European and some North American operators in conjunction with ESD, maybe because FDX is a little bit better suited for high density areas and things like that, high density developments, things like that. So I think there's, both of them have their opportunities, and both of them have their skill sets, so their skills that really are, I think, looking at how service providers can leverage these. But again, Steve, let me kind of bring you in here and get your thoughts on, what's kind of driving some of these thoughts here.
Yeah, this one actually didn't surprise me very much from the data standpoint, right? I think it highlights that there's multiple architectures and kind of tools that the MSOs can use, depending on where they're at today and where they want to go, and and what their budget and end goals might want to be, right? And so, if you look at like DOCSIS 3.1 plus, it makes a lot of sense. For many MSOs, you can take a lot of your existing network, add additional OFDMs on there, right, in order to get more throughput through that network, et cetera. And so that makes a lot of sense as a start point for many. Many MSOs I've talked to is they're looking at it almost as a bridge, right? They're gonna start with that and then bridge over to DOCSIS 4.0. For some MSOs, it may be enough for a nice long runway, and they're waiting for kind of what's next as we continue to evolve, throughout our industry. But no big surprises here. ESD, agree. It's typically, I think, in a little higher favor these days, just because of some of the cost benefits and everything else around that. But FDX definitely is fantastic technology and has its places as well. So again, not very surprised. Just a lot of different offerings out there for MSOs to consider the pros and cons of each.
Yeah, this one was a select all apply. We specifically created the question that way because we didn't want to have to select top two. We really wanted to be able to kind of assess sort of the sensitivity of all these technologies. And maybe just before we move on, Steve, in my own mind, I'm kind of tied, and maybe there's no relationship, but maybe you can let me know what the relationship is. There sort of we saw the the node plus 0 amplifiers, node plus 2. Are some of these node plus 4? Is some of these architectures, how many you're supporting amplifiers, are some of these better suited to maybe FDX or ESD, or is there a difference?
Yeah, so I would say when you get into longer cascades and stuff, generally ESD is the favorite technology there. With that being said, FDX and the big players in the industry that have been focused on this, originally it started out as a node plus 0 type technology. It was kind of proving itself out, and like most technologies, as that starts to get a little maturity, and there's more time and resource put, and then it's starting to expand as well, to go beyond node plus 0. But you're correct. It used to be, if you had a very short fiber deep, what I would call cascade, you could choose between either or. And if you had longer cascades, you really didn't have a choice. And what I think you're seeing today is, as that technology evolves, there starts to become a little more middle ground there, around FDX specifically.
Okay. And there's actually, I don't normally do this, but because we've got a little bit of time left here before we wrap up, there's a question from the audience about the difference between ESD and FDX and when they're typically deployed. So, to me, when I think of FDX, I think it's kind of full duplex mode. It's simultaneous upstreams, as opposed to dedicated with ESD. I kind of think of how they're actually managing the traffic differently. But maybe for the question here, Steve, you can maybe give us a kind of a quick summary of the difference between the two.
Yeah, sure. So two different technologies in order to effectively use the spectrum that you're kind of deploying. So ESD, expanded spectrum DOCSIS, is basically taking what we'd have in traditional HFC networks, where you split the forward and return path by a frequency, right? So in a mid-split, you'd have up to 85 megahertz in the return, and then 105 or 108 down to 1 gigahertz, 1.2, 1 per 8, whatever you can, and then you adjust that traffic capability or speed capability by moving that frequency split along that range, right, and divide the forward and return path. What FDX does is it takes on a different approach, and what it does is actually creates bidirectional traffic over the same frequency in order to try and better utilize a certain amount of spectrum, right? So there's two different approaches. There's positives and minuses to both, from a cost perspective, a technology perspective, and everything else. But two different approaches to solve basically the same sort of problems. Make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay, let's talk about amplifier module upgrades. We've kind of talked about the technologies. So this one was, when does your company plan to start upgrading its amplifiers, no modules, and related outside plant for higher order DOCSIS? You can kind of see here, 16% said they were already kind of beginning upgrades. Keep in mind, this was done late last year, early this year. 38% said they'd be doing it the next year, which is kind of in this window. 2026 would be 24%, 9.3 in 2027. So again, this to me was valuable because I think it reaffirmed sort of the general timeline I had in my own mind that there's a lot of activity that's really has started. Some of it's already started, but a lot more of it's kind of really ramping up now and it's into 2026 as well. Because I think it's clear that there's a lot of pressure on MSOs to keep delivering high quality products, streaming products, and a lot of content that demands that they be able to update their network and upgrade their network. So I think this, to me, it shows that the operators have really started to invest in that and started to have a strategy that they can now execute to do that in this year and also into next year and even into 2027. Would you generally agree with that, Steve?
Yeah, I completely agree. Not many additional comments from my standpoint, but the data makes complete sense, especially when combined with some of the others that we've already kind of reviewed.
Okay, so we've got a couple minutes left here. So let me just talk about predictive analytics. So this is something that I've been following for many years. Analytics has the last decade, I think, has been, whether it's an MSO or a mobile operator, fixed or converged operator, having visibility into the way the network is performing has been something that's been a strategic priority, strategic imperative for all these types of operators. And I think it's, as we move forward, as we look at how to roll out analytics capabilities in all ends of the network, I think it's really important that the MSOs in this case really look at how they can do that for proactive network management. So that was exactly the question we asked them. We asked them, how interested are you using predictive analytics for proactive network management? This can be from a network management, also has some security implications as well. We won't jump into those, but you can look here, and 32% said very interested. 38% said interested. So again, I think it's, only 27% said they were somewhat interested, and 3% said they weren't interested at all. So that's essentially 30%, 70% is, in the higher register of these responses. So again, to me, it just shows that MSOs like other network operators are really looking to getting visibility and leveraging data, leveraging analytics data for their own network performance and updates and things like that. What do you think here, Steve?
No, it makes sense, and I think this is another one of those where if we look at the time when the data was taken a couple quarters ago relative to this survey, I think you would see more moving up to the top, and the reason I say that is it's starting to become reality now, right? Before everybody had the ideas and stuff like, well, obviously if we're collecting data from the network and all these other things, there's all these possibilities. Well, so it's kind of a thought. Well, now it's starting to become productized. Like at SCT this year and others, we and some other people as well started showing some predictive software modules, that basically takes this data, you learn from it, and looking at multiple variables, and it could be everything from weather and over time and different as the things that are monitored out there, change, and you can tie if then causes together, you can get predictive, and through that predictive piece, it's ties into a lot of the other things that we kind of showed before, as far as downtime, mean time to repair, uptime for revenue, etc. The predictive side gets us into a proactive solution rather than reactive when something goes wrong. And and the predictive also can get to the point to where it's like, okay, we're about to have a problem here, and we can do some triage on this before someone's physically able to go out there and fix it. So I think this is something that the interest continues to grow heavily because it is becoming more real.
Yeah, great points. And I think there's a couple of things maybe we'll kind of talk a little bit about here. And in terms of analytics, I said I've been covering analytics for a decade, and it's always been an important part of service providers in terms of understanding their networks. But I think the key part of this too, that even though they're not necessarily always joined together, analytics is now becoming strongly in line with AI. So basically, if your network is being able to is creating a lot of data because it's scaling, and you've got some complex services, you have that data available maybe from an end-to-end network perspective, but you need the ability to be able to analyze it quickly. And as we move forward, this whole concept of autonomous networks are able to sort of self-heal and move forward. This whole idea of predictive analytics being tied to AI is something I think is strong as well. And I think to me, that's what I'm really seeing as some of this being able to take analytics to the next level in terms of how it's not only collecting the data, but how it's being able to using AI and LLMs and things like that to assess it. So yeah, so let's move on to the final slide. And this one is basically looking at this from how to use it for remote network asset management. So this kind of closes the whole feedback loop on this. And this one builds on the previous question: how will you primarily use predictive analytics in managing your network assets remotely? Is it to optimize network performance, 54%, minimize downtime, 51%, address potential network issues, 37, 32, optimize resource allocation, 21, anticipate customer needs? So again, this was the selected top two. So we wanted to get some sort of separation, and maybe these would have been all select all if we'd done that. But I think we did this specifically because we wanted to get some sort of a bit of a separation, and we did. I think the two that kind of stand out for me here are this 54 and the 51. And again, I think we've already talked about, you've provided some great examples, Steve, of remote network asset management in terms of smart amplifiers, what you can do with them and how you can reduce and optimize network performance. So those are clearly ways, I think, that the MSOs are looking at this from a network performance, but also the 51% downtime, because that, again, we just saw how that has huge impacts in terms of not necessarily the cost to repair, but in terms of the lost revenue and the tying up of valuable field resources as well. So what do you think of this one?
Yeah, I look at this and I think you can kind of group it into a couple areas, right? So you've got network, right, for the first three, and and all those are kind of intertwined. I think with where we're going with predictive analysis, especially with around the HFC network, et cetera, and the technology that continues to evolve, as I kind of hit on in the last piece there. So super important, obviously, for the MSOs. And then you look at the next two there around optimize resource allocation and anticipate customer needs. Well, if resource allocation, if this was answered and tied to operations, obviously that goes into the above three. If it's more around bandwidth allocation and those sort of resources in the network, you can tie that into customer needs. And as like we've talked a lot about kind of the smart HFC network, et cetera, where this all becomes very, very powerful is when you take the intelligence and pieces that are being put out there in that access piece of the network, you tie that into pieces of the core and other things to where you have single panes of glass and everything else. You can get a holistic network type of view, and it really helps drive, the allocations of where you need network resources and where customer needs might be heading in those areas in addition. So, again, it's although we're evolving heavily in this area and it's a new area, when you combine the holistic piece together from an overall end-to-end network, it's very, very powerful.
Okay, we're going to wrap it up there, but I think this research to me really kind of was an excellent level set of where MSOs are and what tools and challenges they're facing. But I did want to touch on this question about AI, because I did kind of touch about that a little bit as well. And maybe just get your thoughts on how you think AI might really help evolve network or MSOs evolve their networks. For we talked about analytics, I think there's a clear use case there, but I think there's also AI for security. But maybe we have like a couple minutes left here. Maybe get your thoughts on how AI enabled products will help MSOs evolve their networks even further.
Yeah, I'll pick a couple areas and examples. It's an area AOI is investing in very heavily around our software offerings and AI and a couple specific AI modules. And you can tie it to a couple areas. One is you hit on around kind of the advanced analytics. Now that we have so much data that is coming back from the network, AI and learning and other things like that is allowing us to efficiently weed through that data, right, and create insights out of that data rather than it just being data, because that's what it is, unless you try to gain insights and things out of that. So AI is, a big part of that piece. I think you're going to see as well AI helping around, working with network technicians and people out there in the field too. It's going to be able to help guide them, especially with the workforce that's out there today. I hear that it's more and more difficult to get kind of and get the experience of experts in there in the HFC network. And we can use AI to help guide on where issues are, where they might reside, how do you fix certain things based on what you see from a training standpoint and everything else. I've seen AI starting to be used in some training modules as well in a virtual type realm, which is super cool. And so, yeah, I think there's a number of areas that it will be out used to there. Those are just some examples that are coming reality today.
Good stuff. Okay, well, listen, we're going to wrap it up there. We're just about out of time. Steve, I'd like to thank you for stepping up and presenting today, and for AOI sponsoring this webinar. I think it's really given me an insight of where we are from an MSO evolution perspective, and I hope the audience got a lot out of this. I think there's a lot of data points in the report that you can download. So again, I'd like to thank Steve for presenting today, and I'd also like to thank you, the audience, for attending today's session. There is a survey tool on your user side of the UI, so if you can take the survey, that'll help us plan for future sessions. So for LightReading, thanks everyone for attending, and we hope to see you again at future webinars. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.